Hi there, my name is Aurora, and I'm 21 years old. I've always thought my name was kind of special. It's a little mysterious, like the Northern Lights, which I've always wanted to see one day. I'm originally from a small town in Oregon, but now I'm studying at UCLA. I'm majoring in psychology, and although the workload can be tough, I'm absolutely in love with campus life. Let me tell you a bit about myself. I'm 5 feet 6 inches tall, and I weigh around 125 pounds. People often comment on how my blonde hair shines like gold under the sun. It's naturally straight but has a slight wave at the ends, which I like to think adds a little character. My eyes are a bright blue, almost like the ocean on a clear day, and I've got a light sprinkle of freckles across my nose. My skin is fair, and I've always been careful to take good care of it. Sunscreen is my best friend. When I'm at home, I love to keep things casual. Today I'm wearing my favorite outfit, a light gray crop top that hugs my torso just right and a pair of black denim shorts. They're a little frayed at the edges, giving them a relaxed vibe. I'm barefoot right now, which is usually how I like to be when I'm at home. But if I step outside, I'll probably slide on my white flip-flops. Oh, and if it gets a bit chilly, I'll throw on my oversized cardigan. It's the softest thing I own. Life at home has its ups and downs. I live with my mom and my stepdad, Mike. My mom works long hours as a nurse, so she's not home a lot, which leaves me and Mike to share the space most of the time. I've never been particularly close to him, but we've managed to coexist peacefully for the most part, or so I thought. It all started earlier today. I was in the living room, lounging on the couch and scrolling through my phone. The sunlight was pouring in through the window, and I could hear the faint hum of cars passing by outside. Mike walked into the room and sat down across from me. At first, it seemed like just another ordinary day. He asked me how school was going, and I gave him a polite but short answer. I've never felt completely comfortable around him. There's just something about his energy that feels off. As the day went on, Mike lingered in the living room longer than usual. He asked about my classes and whether I had made any new friends. It was harmless small talk, but the way he leaned forward when I answered made me uneasy. His questions grew more personal. "So, are you seeing anyone at school?" he asked, his tone casual, but the question felt invasive. I hesitated before responding. "Not really, I'm just focused on my studies," I said, trying to keep my tone light. He chuckled. "Smart girl, relationships can be a distraction." I nodded and pretended to focus on my phone, hoping he'd take the hint and leave. But he stayed, making comments about how I was growing up so fast and how proud he was of me. His words might have seemed kind to an outsider, but there was a weight to them that made my skin crawl. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen making myself a sandwich when Mike walked in. "Need any help?" he asked. "No, I'm good," I replied quickly, avoiding eye contact. He leaned against the counter, watching me. "You know, Aurora, you're really turning into a beautiful young woman." My hands froze mid-motion, and I forced a smile. "Thanks," I muttered, focusing on my sandwich. The air felt thick, and I could feel his eyes on me. I finished quickly and retreated to my room, my heart racing. But not long after, I heard a knock at my door. It was Mike. "Hey, Aurora, do you have a minute?" he asked. I hesitated, but eventually said, "Sure, what's up?" He stepped into my room, and that's when things took a turn. His tone was overly familiar, his body language too casual. He made another comment that crossed a line, and I felt my stomach drop. I stood up, putting as much distance between us as I could. "Mike, I think you should go," I said firmly. But he didn't leave. Instead, he stepped closer, his demeanor growing more intimidating. Panic started to rise in my chest. I quickly moved toward the door, trying to keep calm. "Aurora, come on, don't be like that," he said, his voice low. "Get out," I said again, louder this time. Finally, he backed off, muttering something under his breath as he left the room. I locked the door behind him and leaned against it, my heart racing. I couldn't believe what had just happened. I immediately called my mom and told her everything. She was shocked and promised to come home as soon as she could. In the meantime, I stayed in my room, trying to process everything. It was a terrifying experience, but I knew I had done the right thing by standing my ground and reaching out for help. After that, I needed to clear my mind. I took out my journal and started writing. Journaling has always been a way for me to process my emotions, and today was no exception. As I scribbled down my thoughts, I began to feel a sense of control returning. This was my story, and I wouldn't let anyone else dictate how it would unfold. Later that evening, my mom finally came home. She was furious when she confronted Mike, and I could hear their voices echoing through the house. For the first time in a long time, I felt like she truly had my back. She told him to leave, and he packed his things that very night. It was a relief to see him go, but the whole experience left me shaken. In the days that followed, I focused on regaining a sense of normalcy. I leaned on my friends at UCLA, who were incredibly supportive. One of my closest friends, Elena, even came over to stay with me for a few nights. We binge-watched our favorite TV shows, ate way too much popcorn, and just talked about everything. It felt good to laugh again, even if just for a little while. I also decided to take a self-defense class. It's something I'd always thought about doing, but never got around to. The class was empowering, and it gave me a sense of confidence I hadn't felt in a long time. Knowing that I could protect myself if needed was a huge step in moving forward. This experience taught me a lot about resilience and the importance of setting boundaries. It also reminded me how crucial it is to have a support system, whether it's family, friends, or even professionals. I started seeing a therapist to work through the trauma, and it's been incredibly helpful. As for my relationship with my mom, it's stronger than ever. We've had long talks about everything that happened, and I think it's brought us closer. She's made it clear that she'll always be there for me, and I'm so grateful for that. Looking back, I can't say I'm glad this happened, but I am proud of how I handled it. Life isn't always easy, and sometimes we face challenges that test us in ways we never expected. But those challenges can also make us stronger, and they can teach us to value the people and things that truly matter. The days after Mike left brought a strange mix of relief and uncertainty. For so long, his presence had been a shadow over our home, one that I hadn't fully realized until it was gone. The silence in the house was different now. It wasn't oppressive, but rather an invitation to rebuild, to fill the space with something better. My mom and I started talking more, sharing meals together when she wasn't working late shifts at the hospital. For the first time in years, it felt like we were truly connecting. One evening, about 2 weeks after Mike had left, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table with my mom. The soft hum of the dishwasher filled the room as she sipped her tea and looked at me with a mixture of guilt and sadness. "Aurora, I'm so sorry for everything," she said, her voice trembling. "I should have noticed. I should have protected you." "Mom, it's not your fault," I replied gently, reaching for her hand. "You couldn't have known, but we're here now, and that's what matters." Her eyes welled up with tears, and for the first time, I saw the weight she had been carrying, not just from her demanding job, but from the guilt of letting Mike into our lives. It was a moment of mutual understanding, and in that instant, I knew our relationship would be stronger moving forward. As the weeks turned into months, I found myself rediscovering who I was outside the confines of fear and discomfort. One of the biggest changes came when I decided to redecorate the house. My mom and I painted the walls a soft lavender color, replacing the muted beige that had always felt so lifeless. We hung up artwork, most of it my own, abstract paintings I'd started creating during my therapy sessions. The house finally felt like ours. Meanwhile, my blog, Aurora's Light, continued to grow. The messages I received from readers around the world were overwhelming. People shared their own stories of resilience, and many thanked me for giving them the courage to speak up about their struggles. One message in particular stood out. It was from a woman named Clara who lived in a small town in Montana. "Aurora," she wrote, "I read your story and cried. I've been dealing with a similar situation, but I've been too scared to do anything about it. Your bravery has inspired me to take the first step." Reading Clara's message was a powerful reminder of why I had started writing in the first place. It wasn't just about healing myself, it was about creating a space for others to heal too. One afternoon, while scrolling through my emails, I saw a name that made my stomach drop: Mike. The subject line read, "Can we talk?" For a moment, I just stared at the screen, my heart pounding. Part of me wanted to delete it and pretend I'd never seen it, but another part of me felt compelled to read it. Taking a deep breath, I opened the email. "Aurora, I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I'm sorry for everything. I've been doing a lot of thinking and have started going to therapy. I know I can't undo the past, but I want to make amends. If you're open to it, I'd like to talk. Mike, I closed the laptop and sat back, my mind racing. The idea of speaking to Mike again made my skin crawl, but there was also a part of me that wondered if he was genuinely trying to change. I decided to bring it up in my next therapy session. Dr. Harris listened carefully as I read her the email. Aurora, the decision to respond or not is entirely yours, she said. You don't owe him anything, but if you think it could bring you closure, we can talk about how to approach it. After much deliberation, I decided to reply. My response was short and to the point. Mike, I'm glad to hear you're seeking help. However, I'm not ready to have a conversation with you. Please respect my boundaries. It felt empowering to set that boundary and stick to it. For the first time, I felt like I was truly in control of my narrative. As graduation approached, I found myself reflecting on how much I had grown over the past year. My experiences had shaped me in ways I never could have imagined, and I knew I wanted to use my journey to help others. I applied to several graduate programs in counseling psychology, hoping to turn my passion for advocacy into a career. In the meantime, I continued working with Rachel's organization, organizing workshops and speaking at events. One of the most memorable moments came during a retreat for young women who had survived trauma. We sat in a circle, sharing our stories and supporting one another. By the end of the weekend, there wasn't a dry eye in the room, but there was also a palpable sense of hope. One of the attendees, a teenager named Lily, approached me after the final session. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You made me feel like I'm not alone." Her words stayed with me, reaffirming my commitment to this work. Every story I heard, every life I touched, reminded me of the power of resilience and community. Now, as I prepare to start graduate school, I'm filled with a sense of purpose and excitement. My blog has evolved into a full-fledged platform, complete with resources for survivors and a podcast where I interview experts and share inspirational stories. My relationship with my mom continues to deepen, and our home is finally a sanctuary, a place filled with love and laughter. Life isn't perfect, but it's mine, and that's enough. As I look to the future, I'm reminded of a quote I once read. "The wound is the place where the light enters you." My wounds have shaped me, but they've also illuminated my path. And for that, I'm eternally grateful.